Now we're going to look at truncate table SQL command. So that is used to delete all the rows from a table in a database without logging the individual row deletions. So it's much faster than deleting rows one by one, or using the delete command without the where clause. So especially for large tables, this efficiency comes from truncate table deallocating the data pages that is used by a table, so effectively removing all the data at once. However, it does not remove the table structure or its columns, constraints on indexes. Now just imagine you have a huge notebook filled with notes from the past year. Now you decide you no longer need these notes and then you want to start afresh. So using the truncate table command in SQL Server is like taking that notebook and just ripping out all of the pages at once, right? So leaving you with an empty notebook again. So the cover and the structure of the notebook will remain just like the table structure in its columns remains intact. Only the pages or the data that are gone. So it's super fast way to clean out the contents without really having to erase each page line by line, which would be like using the delete command without specifying, which rows to delete. So how it works, so you have a table which is like a notebook. So this table is filled with rows of data similar to the pages in your notebook filled with notes. So, and you decide that you want to empty this table completely to start over, maybe because the data is outdated or you are preparing the table for new data. So by executing truncate table command, you essentially telling SQL Server, hey, let's get rid of all the pages in the notebook at once. And then SQL Server then quickly removes all the pages, leaving you with the empty notebook. So the big plus is that it does this very fast, much quicker than if you had to tear out each page one by one just to erase each line. So your table is now empty, ready to be filled with new data again. So if your table had maybe a counter on a page, it's like maybe an identity column that numbers each row, then using truncate table will reset the counter back to the start. Remember what I said in the beginning? I said you cannot reuse the identity column. So, but in this situation, you can actually reuse it. So one thing that you must keep in mind though, just like tearing out the pages from the notebook, once you truncate a table and confirm the action, you can't get those pages back unless you have a copy somewhere, maybe in SQL Server. Though if you do this as part of special process called transacting, you might have a chance to say, well, I didn't mean to do that, and and then just get the data back before finalizing the action. So truncate table is actually a hard way to quickly clear out the table when you're sure that you don't need the data anymore and you're ready for to start afresh. All right, so we will do some examples. So the key points of truncate table is that it's ideal for removing all the data from a table very quickly, and then only the data is removed, not the table structure. And then in most SQL databases, truncate table operations cannot be rolled back after they are committed, so you cannot undo. However, in SQL Server, it can be part of a transaction. So if you use it as part of a transaction, and then it can be rolled back if necessary. And then if the table contains identity columns, the truncate table will actually reset the identity values so to its seed value, unlike the delete table. And then if typically a user needs at least an alter permission on the table to execute truncate table, and then a table is referred by foreign key constraint or participates in an index view. All right, so now let's consider a scenario where you have a database for an online store, and then you just want to clear out the old table called order details. Right, so that contains order information, for a specific year, and then you plan to archive this data elsewhere. So we're not going to have much there. So we're going to create a new table called table, and then called order details. And then in this table, we're just going to have the order ID, and then which is a int. It's also a primary key. What did I do there? Primary key. All right, and then we're gonna have maybe the product ID, which is an integer as well, and then we're gonna have the quantity, which is the integer as well, and then okay, and then we can just, all right, so now let's insert into the table just to demonstrate this. Insert into order details, and we're gonna have the order ID, and then the product ID, and finally the quantity. And then the values, let's say 1, 101, 2. And then we can say 2, 102, then 1. And then maybe let's insert the other one. So we'll say 3, and then 103, and then perhaps 5. And then finally we can actually select all from order details. Okay, so let's just fix this a little bit, so then we execute. All right, so we can clearly see that we've got this data here. Now, to clear out everything, we just clear out using the truncate table called orders. So I'm going to add this in a new query, and then we will say truncate table order details, and then we can confirm that by reselecting again from the order details. So you see now that it's actually empty when we execute this. So what happens is this command removes all the table quickly, all the table rows quickly and efficiently. And if the order ID is an identity column, its counter will be reset. Then we can actually, that's the only time we can reuse it. So one thing that you must note when using truncate table, while you truncate a table is powerful and useful for specific scenarios, but it's also important to use it cautiously, because once the data is removed and the transaction is committed, especially outside of a transaction context, in the database they don't support rollback to this command, so it cannot be recovered unless you have a backup. So that data will be gone forever. So all the rows will be gone forever. So you have to make sure that you know what you're doing when you use truncate table.